Thank you so much for joining the National Italian American Foundation's webinar, Your Italian Passport, a Conversation on Dual Citizenship. Just a quick note before we get started, all attendees are muted and have their video and chats turned off. During this webinar, only the panelists will be visible. We're also streaming this live on Facebook, and we'll have a recording of tonight's webinar posted on the NIAF's website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel within the next few days for your reference. And with that, I would like to introduce you to NIAF board member and Vice Chair International, John Calvelli, who will be moderating this evening's webinar. John.
Buona giornata. Thank you, Gabriella, and welcome to everyone. On behalf of the National Italian American Foundation, this is one in a series of virtual events that we've been organizing. Very quickly, who are we? What is the National Italian American Foundation? We were founded in 1975 with a very simple mission: to preserve the Italian American heritage and culture, to promote and inspire a positive image and legacy of Italian Americans, and to strengthen and empower ties between the United States and Italy. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C., so we're very engaged in public policy here in the Washington area. We also provide scholarships and programming, actually bringing young people to Italy. It is really exciting to see the incredible work that we've done through the years, trying to reconnect and connect people to their heritage. What's interesting is that as we deal with the COVID crisis, we've been forced to put our programming, our usual programming, on hold. I mean, we're Italian, so we enjoy getting together and having large events. And we've had to think about, how do we bring that education to our community? How do we think about that? And virtual programming clearly is one of the areas that we've thought about. And clearly, it's been successful because we have 500 people on Zoom, and then we're also on Facebook Live. So the bottom line is we're very excited to be a part of this new mechanism to get our message across, and even more excited to have an incredible speaker, one of the NIAF corporate sponsors, a woman, Lauren Hopkins, who is the president, CEO of Your Italian Passport. And I think that's a question that many of us have had through the years. How do I get my Italian citizenship? I have to start with the fact that I am not an Italian citizen, but my wife is an Italian citizen, and my son is an Italian citizen, but somehow I am out. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that. How do you actually move forward to try to get your citizenship? You're going to learn some new Latin terms as we get started. But without further ado, I want to turn it over to Lauren. Lauren, tell us a little bit about this company you created and how you've moved this conversation forward about getting your Italian citizenship. You know, what motivated you to get started?
Sure. Thanks so much, John. I want to start by thanking you and thanking NIAF for this opportunity. I know this is a conversation that many people are looking to have and a topic that's on a lot of people's minds. So I'm excited to be here and welcome all of you to this conversation. As John said, my name is Lauren Hopkins and my company is Your Italian Passport. Despite my deceivingly British sounding name, I too am an Italian American. And like many of you, was curious about this process about 10 years ago. I went through the process of becoming a dual citizen with my mom. And in that process of working on our own and realizing just how difficult it was to navigate these murky waters on our own and figure out what was expected of us and what this process would entail and where it would take us, I discovered that there was an opportunity as an attorney and as an Italian American attorney to help others in the same way. And thus, Your Italian Passport was born, and since then we have helped nearly 1,000 people cross the finish line in the same way. And it's so ironic and so unfair that this is not available to you, but I was shocked when I first got into this to learn just how popular this was, how much demand there was, and additional information is absolutely what is key. So this is a great way to get it out to folks.
So let's jump into it. We've already got people asking questions online, and I've got a bunch of questions to just get the conversation started. What is the Italian Jure Sanguinis law mean?
Sure. It literally means right of blood, but what it means in practical terms is that it's the citizenship that we inherit by nationality. You can compare that to the citizenship that we as Americans inherit by being born on US soil, which is called jus soli, soli being the soil portion of the word, which Italy does not offer. So those of us who are Italian Americans born in the US have inherited our US citizenship by right of birth here in the US, but perhaps have also inherited Italian citizenship, Jure Sanguinis, by nationality of our parents.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, when was this idea of Italian dual citizenship allowed? Because I know that it's been an issue, especially for Americans, to be able to have dual citizenship.
It has a very sordid history. So dual citizenship was first permitted by Italy in August of 1992. Prior to that, Italy's law stated that if you took a second citizenship by naturalization or otherwise in a foreign country, you automatically lost your Italian citizenship. On August 15th of 1992, that law changed, and those who have gone through, for instance, a naturalization process, which is the word for becoming a citizen of a place, have maintained their Italian citizenship. But prior to that date, it was unavailable. That said, there is a caveat in the law that said the children of someone going through the naturalization process, if those children were born, for instance, in a place where they obtained foreign citizenship because of their birth on that foreign soil, they inherited their Italian citizenship from the parent, even if that parent later lost theirs pursuant to their own naturalization, and the child retained it throughout that naturalization. So though for the naturalizing party, maintaining one's Italian citizenship in the context of naturalization wasn't possible until 1992, it has still passed to many of us through this caveat in the law, and we'll break that down further as we go.
Got it. So how do I know if I qualify for Italian citizenship? You know,
the big question.
It is a daunting process, to say the least, and I can imagine. You know, we've probably have over 1,000 people on the Zoom that's the one question, like, oy.
Right.
Word
that's really the
brothers and
golden
sisters.
Question. Absolutely. That's what everyone wants to know. That's what everyone is trying to determine for themselves or seeking assistance in determining. What is critical is knowing the date of naturalization of your Italy-born ancestor. So breaking this down into parts. Your Italian citizenship is linked to your closest Italy-born ancestor. So for instance, you would seek citizenship through him if he is a viable source of citizenship for you. If he is not, you cannot go back to an earlier generation. So it's that closest Italy-born ancestor that is critical. And the thing to determine is if and when they became a naturalized citizen of the US or elsewhere. If they never did, great. Then at the time of the birth of either yourself or an intermediate ancestor, that could be okay, so long as the birth of that intermediate ancestor or your own birth took place prior to that person's naturalization. There are a few other critical dates. That's the big one that applies to 90% of folks.
So just bottom line, like, so my story, my parents were born in Italy, in Calabria. They came to the United States. They became American citizens. I was born, and actually my brother was born before they became American citizens. Then they became American citizens. I was born. 1992 comes, my parents are able to get their citizenship back. My brother is able to get his citizenship. Another great word, bupkis, nothing. I was unable to get it. Okay.
This is what we commonly call ugly Thanksgiving, which is a lot of times when people realize certain siblings who were born prior to the naturalization, they and their descendants are eligible for citizenship, and those born afterwards are out of luck.
And that's the same thing that happened with my wife. My wife was born before my mother-in-law became a citizen. So she has her Italian citizenship, and she was able to pass it to her child, my child, to my son.
Yes.
Great.
So just as our ancestors passed it to us, whether we elected to act on it or not, we have passed it to our children as well. It's automatic.
So, so that first step is obviously kind of understanding that process, right? Like, where do you fit in, and understanding that first that first person that came from Italy, and whether they lost their citizenship, they gave up their citizenship. So granted, we figured that out. We know that. How long would it usually take for this process? How long does this process usually take?
Yes. I don't have great news on this front. So this is a long journey, a long but worthwhile journey. As anyone on this webinar who has had the opportunity to schedule a citizenship appointment at the consulates here in the US knows, the wait list is long. The average wait time to even get into the consulate to present your application materials is at least 18 months. So that's on the front end of things. And then on the back end of things, assuming that your appointment goes well, no requests for additional records or modifications to records are made of the applicant, there will be a wait time on the back end. The consulates have up to 2 years under law to process granted applications. Some of them take nearly that amount of time. Others are much quicker in their processing. So in general, I tell everyone embarking on this process with your Italian passport, look at this as a 3-year journey. There is no reason to think you won't be through the process in that amount of time. Though with the wait list at various consulates, it can be longer, but those will be things that we have great advance notice on. But on the average, 3 years is what it takes to get through.
Got it. So can I submit my application for Italian citizenship actually in Italy, or do I have to go to one of the consulates here?
This is a great and very popular question. The short answer is yes, this is legally available to do. You can apply for citizenship directly in Italy. The catch is that in order to be eligible to do so, you must first establish yourself as a resident in Italy. That means being physically present in Italy for as many as 45 consecutive days. Where do I get this 45 consecutive days? So what would happen is when you go to Italy, you arrive in the town where you intend to declare your residency. I should also insert here that you can't be staying at a hotel. You can't be staying at an Airbnb. You must be staying either with family or have a lease or own a home, some sort of actual residence that you are declaring you now reside in. You would make this declaration to the comune, to the municipal office, declaring I am resident at, providing them that address, and they have 45 days to send out local police to confirm that yes, indeed, you are there, knock on the door. Once that 45 days comes and goes, or if they do their check in advance of the 45 days, your residency is established and you can submit your citizenship application to the comune. And the municipal officer there will serve the same role that the consulate official here would serve if you were applying at the consulate that covers your area of residence in the US. Once that is submitted, it will take many months, just as it does here, for your application to be processed, though you are free to leave so long as you feel comfortable knowing that someone is there to receive communication on my behalf at that residence I declared in Italy. So it is possible. The things that make it difficult for most people are obtaining an address to use as a residence and being able to walk away from life here for up to 45 consecutive days.
Got it. Got it. So this question did not come from my wife, or from me, excuse me, but one of the questions that we put together was, I'm an Italian citizen. So in this case, my wife, she's an Italian citizen. Is my spouse eligible to become an Italian citizen? So bottom line, can my wife, Maria, help me get my citizenship?
Yes. So many of the questions, the short answer is yes. But there's a catch.
I have to stay married. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the catch is you have to stay married.
Check on. Okay.
That's number one. Number two is that unlike those of us going through the process, the bloodline process, we are already citizens under Italian law, having our status formally recognized by the government. Alternatively, spouses, assuming they, unlike your wife, who is also eligible for her own Jure Sanguinis citizenship, assuming your spouse is not eligible in that way, he or she is the Italian government has added this additional hurdle, which is a language requirement. Many people have probably seen this on the consulate websites or in chat rooms, etc. Unlike those of us who are already citizens having our status simply recognized, where we have no language requirement, though I strongly encourage everyone going through this process to begin a course of study. It will only enhance your experience as a citizen. Spousal applicants must meet what is called a B1 level proficiency in both written and oral Italian. What is this? What is this B1 level proficiency? It's not as basic as ordering a pizza in Florence, which I'm sure we've all done and thought we were so proud of ourselves that we did this. Yes, that would be included, but it's a higher level than that. I encourage everyone to start with a basic Google search of the terms B1 level proficiency. This is an established linguistic standard. There will be many resources available online to determine, okay, what is a reasonable expectation of someone seeking to meet this standard? There will be practice exams that you can use to see how close am I? What will I have to learn? And those test results are part of the spousal application. Aside from that, the spousal application is relatively straightforward compared to the presentation of documentation that those of us in the bloodline process will go through. The spousal process will seem quite simplistic in comparison. It's really the language requirement that most people need to think about before setting down that path.
Got it. Okay, B1 level proficiency. I've got a new Google search I got to do. So,
Yes.
You know what? Great news. I've obtained my Italian citizenship. I'm now a citizen of the Republic of Italy. First question that comes to mind for many of us is, now do I have to pay Italian taxes?
Right. So this is also one with a short answer and then a catch. So the good news is the short answer is no. Simply by becoming an Italian citizen does not mean you automatically expose yourself to Italian taxation. Italian taxation is also contingent upon residency in Italy. And what is residency? We touched on that earlier, but residency for purposes of taxation is much larger than the 45 days that I mentioned prior. So for purposes of taxation, the thing to keep in mind is if you begin to live in Italy full time, yes, you will be subject to Italian taxation. That is on your global earnings, not just earnings coming from Italy. Perhaps you have no earnings coming from Italy. Perhaps you have a pension here, possibly subject to taxation. If you're making such a large transition in life that you are living full-time in Italy, you want to speak to a professional about your tax exposure. But what about those of us who are somewhere in between, who are saying, well, as a citizen, I'm going to stay for longer than my 7-day vacation that I was previously taking, but I'm also not moving there full-time. Well, the important number to remember is 183. That is the number of days beyond, if you stay beyond that number in Italy in a calendar year, you expose yourself to potential taxation. There are many people who are dual citizens who are very cognizant of that number and careful to make sure that they have entry and exit stamps in their passports that indicate I was not here in the country for more than 183 days in the calendar year, so that they can rest easy knowing that they are not exposing themselves to any Italian taxation. One final point, if you do make that lifestyle change where you're there that much amount of time or longer, just know that there is a US and Italian tax agreement, and they do offset one another to some extent. So you will get some relief on what you owe to one because of what you pay to the other. This should not be looked at as a one-to-one, and you think to yourself, well, I paid the exact same amount, I simply wrote 2 checks. Not necessarily. Be careful, talk to a tax professional if making this sort of transition in life.
So let me ask you, can you talk to a little bit about what you think some of the benefits are of being an Italian citizen, other than that sense of pride, right? I don't need anything per se, but what are some of those benefits that you say, I'm glad I have my Italian citizenship for this?
Sure, absolutely. This is a very common question when I speak to people on the phone who are considering embarking on this process. most people coming to me, most people considering embarking on this and seeking a second citizenship are pursuing it for one of three reasons. One that you mentioned, it is a point of pride, it's a tribute to family members. Absolutely, that is one reason. Number two, younger people, those that are entering the university system, those that are entering the job market, are interested in making themselves available to study throughout Europe or to be competitive in the job market. So what Italian citizenship does, because Italy is part of the European Union, it not only permits you to stay in Italy for as long as you wish to be there, but it also permits you all of the same things that are afforded an Italian citizen who is born and raised in Italy. And that goes beyond the Italian borders, meaning that you can participate in the university system in Italy and elsewhere. You can participate in the job market without need of a work-sponsored visa, which makes an American applicant like ourselves much more attractive to a potential employer. On the other end are those that are coming out of the job market and headed for retirement and saying, I really am interested in a second home, a place to get away. I want to know how I can smooth the path for myself and how I can be able to stay there as long as I wish. And that's another benefit. Purchasing a property in Italy is very difficult to do if you're not a citizen. It's not impossible, but being a citizen absolutely helps to cut through some of the bureaucracy and the red tape, especially if you are seeking any sort of financing. If you're purchasing a home for cash, it's one thing. If you are seeking any sort of financing from an Italian institution, being an Italian citizen is almost imperative. Some other things to consider: you can, but you do not have to participate in the healthcare system. Many people think the European style of healthcare is wonderful, and many people don't. Just know that simply being a citizen does not obligate you to seek medical services there if you're not interested in them. You can, as a citizen of the US, continue to maintain your health insurance here and seek medical assistance here.
Got it. No, it's very helpful. So there are a bunch of questions that we've been getting, and I hope people realize that we were asking people to send their questions in beforehand. So I know, Lauren, that you have a bunch of questions that came before that you were going to be answering. So what I'll do is a little bit of double duty. If you can answer some of those questions, and I'll go through the Q&A and see if anything pops out that might be of interest.
Absolutely. That sounds great. I have a few of those written down here. This is one that I saw from so many people that I'm not going to attribute it to any one question asker. It was asked by so many. How does an applicant for citizenship prove that their ancestor never became a naturalized US citizen? So before we dive into that, we know that that's one of the critical portions of your Italian citizenship application, is establishing the date of naturalization and presenting to the consulate or elsewhere the naturalization paperwork that proves it. So it's very straightforward in our minds. How would I prove when my ancestor did naturalize? It's more difficult if your ancestor is someone who never became a US citizen. And so the question is, how do I prove the non-existence of something? Well, for most people, for everyone, it's a two-step process, a two-document level of proof. Those documents, there will be two forks in the road. So number one, everyone needs, in support of their application, a statement from USCIS, which is the abbreviation for the US Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is our ultimate authority on naturalization in the United States. You need a statement from what is called their records branch. Their records branch, which is one particular part of USCIS, is the only part qualified to issue a certificate of non-existence of record. In short, what that means is their office will have done a search and they will issue to you a statement that says, we did a search for a naturalization record of this person. No such record was found. We hereby issue a certified statement reporting those findings. That is one of the two things that the consulate will look for in your application if trying to establish no naturalization. The second is a census record for at least 75% of folks going through this process. The second part will be a census record. It must be a certified census record. Census records come from the National Archives, which can be accessed at archives.gov. And what is most important is that you're looking for census records being taken every 10 years. As we know, it is 2020. Every 10 years, you are looking for the first federal census taken after the birth of your ancestor born, the first one born here in the United States. So going back to my earlier example, if grandfather was born in the US, in Italy, father was born here in, say, 1922, then you would be, and grandfather never became a US citizen, you are looking for the 1930 census on which grandfather has indicated he is a non-naturalized alien. That 1930 census in its certified format can come from, would come from the National Archives, and that is the second of two pieces that apply to most folks. Just so that I don't get too far down the rabbit hole, I can talk about this stuff for days, to be quite honest. But there is a group of folks whose ancestor came more recently. And so the firstborn person here may have been born, for instance, in the 1940s or later. And so if you were looking for a census record dated 1950 or more current, number one, citizenship is not a question on those more recent census records. Number two, they are not currently available to the public. So what the consulate would be looking for is your ancestor's alien file, which takes us back to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. That is an agency which can provide that. Moving on to the next question.
Got it. And I'm gonna,
or feel free to jump in with one.
No, Lauren, I just want to say that we've had over 68 questions, and what I'm thinking is I'm kind of scrolling through them. I think the questions are great. Would it be possible to share these questions with you and then possibly answer them after if we just don't have enough time? How's
Absolutely.
That? Please go ahead. I think these are great questions that we have here from the audience that we've gotten.
This is one, actually I'll jump ahead here. So this is from James Zarek. The question is, my wife and I established our citizenship 10 years ago. In fact, this summer we will be renewing our passports. Bravo. Our son, who is 31 years old, would now like to get his passport too. Since, as his parents, we have already established our citizenship, does he need to do anything more than apply for his passport? That's the first question. What documents will be involved and to whom should they be directed? So we need to break this question down into parts. Number one, anyone 18 years or older who is seeking to be recognized formally as an Italian citizen must appear before the Italian consulate and pay them the €300 fee in order to formally be recognized as a citizen. So if your son was not part of your citizenship process 10 years ago, he was 21 years old, he will first need to book a citizenship appointment at the consulate that covers his area of residence. When he goes there, then we get to the next question. What documents will be involved? Italian law currently reads that the applicant must present all materials unless prior materials have been presented by family members, specifically sibling or parent, at that same consulate. So if your son, James, is applying somewhere other than you did for citizenship, if, for instance, James, you live in New York and your son lives in LA, hold off on the LA example. If your son lives in Miami, Miami will expect the complete set of ancestral documentation, although 85% of it, James, you have already presented to the folks in New York. It is entirely redundant, if you ask me personally, but necessary. This said, there are consulates currently taking a different approach. I'm not sure their legal basis for being able to do so, but it's a fact that they're doing it. And they are saying if the parent, in this case James, if James's birth record has been successfully registered in his ancestral town in Italy, which is what happens to all of our records when we go through this process, if James's birth record is over there, then all that his son needs to present is proof of that and the documents that link himself to his father. The takeaway is this. Ask your consulate first. In all likelihood, the answer will be that if your child is applying or your family member is applying at a consulate different than the one you applied at, that family member will be expected to present all materials anew. But if you get written guidance from a consulate official that says, no, we can rely on fewer documents because we have the proof of the parent having completed this process already, hang on to that and rely on it.
So just wanted to remind everybody that we are going to be having another session with Lauren next month, where we're going to be digging into the weeds of the 1948 law, spousal citizenship, working with consulates. That will be a paid opportunity, but it'll also be a smaller group. We're gonna limit that to approximately 20 to 25 people, so that therefore you'll be able to ask, personally some of these questions and really dive into some of the details. But I've got one great question that I got from Mary Modica. I met with the consulate to get my Jure Sanguinis citizenship. They rejected me until I could prove that Francesco Modica and Luigi Modica were Frank Modica and Louis Modica. They changed their names at some point on some documents, and she then writes a little later, my own cousins didn't face this issue. Why am I facing this issue? Any thoughts or reflections on that?
Yes, of course. Unfortunately, there is very little oversight, in my opinion, of the consulates. Each operates as its own fiefdom. What one does is not necessarily what another would say about the same set of materials. And what happens at the same consulate with one consulate official may not be the opinion of another consulate official. I wish it weren't this way. Unfortunately, it is. It's the system in which we have to operate in order to get our citizenships recognized. Now, this said, most of the consulate officials, this particular example surprises me a little bit, because most consulate officials, I honestly can't think of an example other than this one, generally accept the Americanization of the first name of the immigrating party. Francesco to Frank, Giuseppe to Joseph is looked at not as a discrepancy, but rather a standard Americanization of the first name. Was the question from Maria? Was that her first name?
Mary,
excuse me.
probably Maria at some point, but Mary.
So to answer Mary's question, why you're going through this is because you are at the mercy of another human who has the authority to make a decision that his or her colleague may not agree with. And so what happened to your cousins or to your family members with the same set of documents is not necessarily what will happen to you. This said, it is not the end of the road. Modification of records is a common part of this process. I tell all of the folks that we work with here at Your Italian Passport, 100% of cases include discrepancies, 100%, including my own. Many of them get through this process without modifications being required. But those that do, you may need assistance in having that document changed. Oftentimes it can be done through a simple submission of paperwork to a records agency, a Department of Health, a court clerk, etc. But sometimes it does require court assistance and a court directive telling a Department of Health to make a requisite change. All of these things are possible. Don't give up, Mary. It can be done. Whether you pursue this on your own or you seek professional assistance, you can accomplish your goal.
So we have an anonymous attendee who asks, what if one parent was naturalized before I became a citizen? And I'm sorry, I just lost it. One was naturalized before, and then one parent was naturalized later after I was born. Which date should I use?
So the great news about this process is you need only be eligible through one branch of your family tree, not all branches of your family tree. So if one leads to a dead end because you have an ancestor who naturalized prior to the birth of yourself or a relevant ancestor, but you have another Italy-born ancestor who naturalized never or after the relevant birth, then you can seek citizenship through that person, and you may disregard the fact that another ancestor is not a viable source of citizenship for you.
Got it. Happy to go, but there's another couple of good questions I know that we've gotten earlier. So
I have a few here too. Domenico Dacqui asks, my question is, how can I get an Italian passport if I've already received a letter stating that my Italian citizenship has been recognized? I chose this question because it comes up more than I ever imagined, I think, and there is just so much uncertainty about how to do basic things with the consulates. So we can sort of break this down. Domenico, your citizenship is official when you receive that letter from the consulate advising you of the same. Many of these letters that we all await will advise you therein that you can schedule an appointment for a passport. If your letter didn't, it's not unheard of, so don't be alarmed, but just know that that is a right that you have as an Italian citizen. how do we go about making an appointment with these consulates, whether citizenship or passport, as many of you know, and probably have pulled your many a hair out in navigating. Most of them, the embassy is an exception right now, but most of them are using an electronic calendar system. And you probably noted that the citizenship appointments have a very long wait list, but once you complete that and you're eligible to collect a passport, it's that same electronic system that you will use to book a passport appointment. The wait lists are far shorter. On the date of the passport appointment, you will go in with your citizenship letter, 2 passport size photos, and payment for the passport booklet, and you will walk out with it that day.
Wow, that is great. I think we're kind of coming up. I think there's one more question on the list that you want to go through.
So I have 2 more if we have the time.
I think
let
we
me
have a few
know.
more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. This is one that I have entered because I want people to be aware of this, and I think before you embark on this process, it's almost impossible to know that this is coming up. But as so many of us have either reside in the New York area or have history in New York, it is imperative to know that collection of New York birth records for deceased people, be it our grandparents, great-grandparents, even your parents, are subject to far more restrictive laws than apply to the other 49 states. This may mean that you have to first obtain a court order from the county of your ancestor's birth, directing the Department of Health to release that birth record. This can be, for someone navigating this process on their own, an insurmountable challenge. So if this is sounding as something that applies to you, just be aware that assistance is out there. For instance, I am a New York barred attorney. I can assist with something like this. Any New York barred attorney can assist. But that if you are not in a position to handle this on your own, you may be seeking professional assistance, and it is imperative to be working with a New York barred attorney in order to make that happen. So I realize that doesn't apply to our entire audience, but it comes up so much that I feel it has to be mentioned. This can be a reason that people abandon this process. I've seen it time and time again. Don't give up. Help is out there. It is possible. Just know that there is an additional hurdle in your process. And then I have one that perhaps segues us to the next session this is my final question. If you have more, I'm happy to sit here all night, quite frankly.
We have 96, Lauren, so I think we're going to have to.
Fantastic. From Salvatore Mauro. My grandmother became a U.S. citizen in 1939, and my mom was born in 1930. I understand there is a legal petition under the 1948 case law that would need to be done. I have originals and some copies of all pertinent documents. How much would it cost to have an Italian attorney process the necessary petitions? In short, there is this additional caveat in this process that, as Italian law on the books currently reads, women in our families, be it be it someone born in Italy or otherwise, cannot pass citizenship to a child born before January 1st of 1948, whether that's you or whether that's your parent getting citizenship from your grandmother, for instance. That's the way the law currently reads. That said, don't give up hope. In 2009, the top appeals court in Italy weighed in on this and said, absolutely not. This is a constitutional violation and a discrimination against women. This cannot stand. Men and women must be able to pass citizenship equally. Unfortunately, 11 years later, we have yet to get a change to the civil code. Because there has been no change to the civil code, the consulate officials here are powerless to review and process a case of this nature. But don't give up hope. Your case can still be heard. You can still become a citizen. Your materials must be reviewed, however, by the court in Rome, the only court in Italy that is authorized to hear cases of this nature. Yes, you will need the assistance of an Italian attorney in order to do this. Your Italian passport, we do work with an Italian firm in Rome to bring cases of this nature. We can help you. Other professional agencies can help you. In time, yes, it's a long journey. The building of the application process follows much the same timeline as it would if you were applying at the consulate. On the back end of things, we have seen folks go from submission of the petition to holding the order, which will recognize citizenship within 90 days. We have seen these drag out for 2 and 3 years. We are completely at the mercy of the judge to whom we are assigned and how busy that judge's docket is. So timeline can be daunting. Costs are not insignificant. There is quite a bit of work that goes into this. You will want to consult with whoever you're considering working with about the specifics of that before embarking on this process, because it's no small undertaking.
So with that, I am going to have one last question from Linda Myers, which is, how can I register and pay for the session in which the 1948 rule will be discussed? Great question, Linda. We are going to be putting that up on our website, www.niaf.org. You'll have information there. In Lauren's next session, she's going to be talking more, going right into those weeds on the 48 law, spousal citizenship, working with consulates. Some of the questions that I think a lot of you have had, there were several on here that were talking about, what do I do? I live in Philadelphia. How can I get an appointment? What's the process, etc.? The bottom line is go to www.niaf.org and you'll be able to get information on the next session, which will be, again, a much smaller session with Lauren Hopkins. I want to, first of all, thank our corporate sponsor for being so open, accessible, transparent, thoughtful, and informative. Lauren Hopkins is just a great hour together to learn a little bit more about our citizenship and how we can get that Italian citizenship. But more importantly, it's always a pleasure to be talking to someone with Italy right behind them. Just reminds me of that great country and the connection between the United States and Italy. And especially as we're thinking and we're going through this terrible crisis in our country, it means so much that our two nations get closer together. So I just want to thank you for the time and look forward to seeing many of you on the next call with Lauren. So buona giornata, and again, thank you, Lauren.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Thank you to NIAF as well. The pleasure is mine. Much of what we discussed here today, you can find as a resource on our website, which is youritalianpassport.com. So you don't need to have memorized today's session. It's all there for your review, and happy to help any and all of you through this process. But again, thank you, John. Always a pleasure. Thank you, NIAF. I look forward to seeing you.
Bye-bye.